Do you ever get that feeling when you're driving down a road you've been on 1,000 times, but for some reason it feels different, like you've missed something, or there's a turn you never noticed before? That's what happened to me, and it changed everything. It started last summer. I had just moved back to my hometown after spending a few years away for work. I'd been restless for a while. City life didn't suit me, and I was itching for the kind of quiet that only small towns can offer. So I packed up, rented a little house near the woods, and figured I'd settle in. The town hadn't changed much since I left. It was one of those places where everyone knew your name, where the local diner still served the same greasy pancakes, and the bar stools at Tony's were worn in by decades of the same regulars. It felt familiar, comfortable, safe. But then, one evening, something strange happened. I was driving home from a late dinner at Tony's. It was a route I knew well, Old Mill Road, winding through the outskirts of town, with thick trees lining the road on either side. I could probably drive it blindfolded. I knew it so well. But that night, something caught my eye. There was a turn. A small, unmarked dirt road, barely visible through the trees. I swear it had never been there before. I'd driven this road so many times I knew every bump and curve, but there it was, clear as day, like it had always been there. I should have kept driving. But you know how curiosity is. It nags at you, tugs at the edges of your mind until you have to see for yourself. So I turned. The dirt road was narrow, the trees closing in on either side. My headlights barely pierced the darkness ahead, and the deeper I drove, the more unsettled I felt. The air felt thicker here, like it was pressing in on me, and the trees seemed to lean in, their branches clawing at the sky. I must have driven for about 15 minutes, though it felt longer. The road twisted and turned in ways that didn't make sense. I was about to turn around when I saw it. A house. It was an old, 2-story farmhouse, its paint peeling and windows dark. It stood at the end of the road, surrounded by overgrown grass and weeds, as if it had been forgotten by time. I pulled up in front of it, the crunch of gravel under my tires the only sound in the oppressive silence. There was something wrong about the house. It looked abandoned, but it didn't feel abandoned. It felt like it was waiting. I can't explain it, but the air around it buzzed with an unnatural stillness. I got out of the car, my curiosity still stronger than my growing unease. The air was cool, the smell of damp earth hanging heavy in the air. As I walked toward the house, the wind picked up, rustling the trees around me, and I swear I heard something whisper my name. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The wind died down, and the whispering stopped, but the feeling of being watched didn't. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, staring at the house. My hand reached for the doorknob without me realizing it, like I was being pulled forward by some invisible force. The door creaked open with a long, low groan, revealing a dark hallway. The smell hit me first, stale, musty, like the air hadn't moved in years. Dust particles floated through the narrow beam of my flashlight, and the floorboards creaked under my weight as I stepped inside. The hallway led to what looked like a living room. The furniture draped in dusty sheets. Everything was old, untouched. It was like the house had been frozen in time, waiting for someone to disturb it. But what really caught my attention was the painting. It hung above the fireplace, a massive oil painting of a man. His face was sharp, with piercing eyes that seemed to follow me wherever I moved. He wore a suit, old-fashioned and formal, and his expression was cold, almost disapproving. I couldn't tear my eyes away from him. There was something about his gaze, something unsettling, like he knew something I didn't. And then the lights flickered. I jumped, whipping my flashlight toward the ceiling. The old chandelier hanging in the living room had come to life, casting a dim, flickering glow over the room. But that wasn't possible. The house had looked abandoned. There shouldn't have been any electricity. My heart was racing now, my breath coming in shallow gasps. I turned to leave, but the door slammed shut behind me with a deafening bang. I froze, my mind racing. Maybe it was the wind. The sound of footsteps echoed through the house. I whipped around, shining my flashlight into the darkness, but there was no one there. Just the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps moving toward me. My skin prickled with fear, and I backed up, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The footsteps stopped, and for a moment the house was silent again. Then I heard it. A whisper. It was faint, barely audible, but it was there, my name. Jack. I bolted for the door, my hands fumbling with the knob. It wouldn't budge. I yanked on it, but it was like the door was stuck, sealed shut. My pulse thundered in my ears, panic rising in my ears, panic rising in my chest as I pounded on the door, desperate to get out. The footsteps started again, closer this time. I could hear them coming from behind me, slow and steady, like whoever, or whatever, was taking its time. I didn't dare look back. Finally, the door gave way, and I stumbled out into the night, my heart hammering in my chest. I ran to my car, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the keys, finally jamming them into the ignition. The engine roared to life, and I tore down the dirt road, not daring to look back at the house. When I got home, I locked every door and window, but sleep didn't come. I kept hearing the whisper, my name echoing in the silence of my room. The next day, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that hung over me. I tried to go about my day, but my thoughts kept drifting back to the house, that painting, those footsteps. I had to know more. I went to the town library, digging through old records, asking around. Most people didn't remember the house, or, if they did, they seemed reluctant to talk about it. But I finally found something, an old newspaper clipping from the 1930s. The house had belonged to a man named Samuel Granger. He was a local businessman, wealthy, respected. But something had happened. The article was vague, but it mentioned that his wife had disappeared under mysterious circumstances, and not long after, Granger himself vanished. The house had been abandoned ever since. I didn't want to believe it, but everything pointed to that house. Whatever had happened there had left a mark, something that still lingered, waiting to be found. That night, the knock came. It was around midnight. I was sitting in my living room, trying to shake off the feeling that I was being watched when I heard it. 3 sharp knocks on my front door. My heart leapt into my throat. I got up slowly, my legs feeling like lead, and walked toward the door. The knocks came again, louder, more insistent. I looked through the peephole, but there was no one there. Just the empty street, bathed in the pale light of the street lamps. I opened the door, and there it was. The painting. The same one from the house, with the same cold, piercing eyes staring back at me. I slammed the door shut, my mind racing. How had it gotten here? Who had brought it? I didn't sleep that night. The following days were worse. Every night, I'd hear the knocks. Every night, I'd find something from that house. First, it was the painting. Then, an old, dusty book appeared on my kitchen table, one I had seen in the house's library. The night after that, I found a chair, an antique wooden chair that had been in the living room. It was like the house was coming to me, piece by piece. And then one night, the knocks stopped. Instead, I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps moving through my house, coming closer to my bedroom. I locked the door, hiding under the covers like a child, but the footsteps didn't stop. They stopped right outside my door. And then I heard it. That same whisper, soft and cold, saying my name. Jack. I don't know how much longer I can stay here. I don't know what's coming for me, but I can feel it. The house isn't done with me. The house isn't done with me. It's pulling me back, dragging me into whatever nightmare it holds. I don't know what I'll find when I go back, but I know one thing for sure. I can't escape it.